My husband is the crown prince, but he's been pretending to be an amnesiac butcher, living out a poor couple's life with me in this little village. Until that night, when I overheard him talking to his shadow guard. Miss Ning saved His Highness's life, and her feelings for you are entirely genuine. Once you've secured your position, wouldn't you consider giving her the title of a concubine? How could I possibly bring a coarse village woman like her into the Eastern Palace? She and I were nothing but a passing performance. Rewarding her with 1,200 taels of gold is already more than generous. I was pressed against the door, eavesdropping, and nearly couldn't hold back my laughter. Little did he know, I've been reborn. That money I've been waiting for has finally almost arrived. The shadow guards had been coming unusually often lately. Each time, Xiao Jingqi would deliberately exhaust me, then wait until I'd fallen dead asleep, before quietly slipping on his clothes and heading out. Could the day of his return to the palace be drawing near? I made a deliberate point of staying alert. When he got up, I quietly crept to the door. Your Highness, the day grows closer.
What are your plans for Miss Ning?
Xiao Jingqi said nothing for a moment. After all, it was Miss Ning who saved your life. Her devotion to you is wholehearted. If you're inclined, giving her the position of a concubine in the future wouldn't be unreasonable. Zhang Wanning is coarse and overbearing. She can barely read a handful of characters. How could I possibly bring a woman like that back to the palace? She and I were always just a passing performance. Rewarding her with 1,200 taels of gold is already a tremendous act of grace. In the moonlight, the shadow guard shook his head, as though feeling sorry for me. But whatever they said after that drifted away entirely. Because the only 4 words ringing in my ears were, 1,000 taels of gold. I forcibly suppressed the grin threatening to split my face, swallowed my laughter, and crept back to bed. Xiao Jingqi still had no idea I'd been reborn. From the very beginning, I knew exactly what kind of man he was. In my last life, the one who found him wasn't me. It was Liu Daya from the village. She'd found a handsome young man collapsed at the village entrance, fallen for him at first sight, and insisted on marrying him no matter what. The night before the wedding, I'd even tried to warn her. A man needs real ability. You can't judge by a face alone. That comment came back to bite me spectacularly. On the day Xiao Jingqi returned to the palace, jade crown on his head, python-embroidered robes on his back, 100,000 soldiers knelt to receive him. The little path at the village entrance was packed so tightly you couldn't squeeze a needle through. It was only then that it dawned on me. The man Liu Daya had brought home was none other than the exalted crown prince himself. Xiao Jingqi's whole persona had been an act from start to finish. He'd deliberately hidden in this remote little village to quietly amass his strength, and had ultimately emerged as the final victor in the struggle for the throne. When Xiao Jingqi passed Liu Daya on his way out, his manner was ice cold. The briefest glance, and he didn't even raise an eyelid. From that day on, Liu Daya was as though bewitched. Her head full of dreams of becoming crown princess. She spent every day clutching the treasure Xiao Jingqi had bestowed on her and weeping, saying she didn't want the money, she only wanted to be his crown princess. I genuinely couldn't understand it. What was there to cry about? If it had been me, I'd have wrung that future emperor dry, gotten my fill and sorted myself out. Once he was back in the palace, I'd spend the rest of my life sitting on mountains of gold and silver. No hunger, no worry. By any calculation, you'd come out ahead. But who could have known a year later? Just as Xiao Jingqi ascended the throne, a plague broke out in the village. Some fell ill, some died, and I didn't escape it either. As I lay dying, for some inexplicable reason, Xiao Jingqi's cold face floated into my mind. I was so envious I could barely stand it. 1,200 taels of gold. If only I'd had Liu Daya's luck. At least I might have changed the fate now bearing down on me. I assumed I was going to slip out of this life just as meagerly as I'd lived it. But when I opened my eyes again, I'd been reborn. This time I didn't stop to think twice. I ran straight to the village entrance, for no other reason than to get there before Liu Daya, and claim Xiao Jingqi for myself. I dressed myself up prettily every single day, and kept watch for a full half month. I waited and waited. And finally, there he was. Xiao Jingqi, covered in wounds. Before he'd even had a chance to collapse, I hurried forward with a smile, and caught him firmly. Who are you? Where is this place? Even in his weakened state, Xiao Jingqi was wary. He pressed a sword against my throat, warning me not to come any closer. I didn't care in the slightest. Good sir, I'm here to save you. Regardless of how much Xiao Jingqi struggled, I hauled half his body onto my shoulder in one go, and dragged him home by whatever means necessary. On the way back, I paid no attention to his muffled groans of pain. I was blooming with joy inside. This heaven-sent fortune had been caught by me after all. By the time Xiao Jingqi woke again, fate had completely changed course. This time he was lying in my bed. Laid out before Xiao Jingqi were medicines for border wounds, medicines for bruising from falls, medicines for blade wounds, medicines for strains and injuries, all prepared well in advance. I had bought back every good remedy available on the market, terrified of leaving any wound of Xiao Jingqi's untreated. Good sir, where are you hurt? I'll see to it. Xiao Jingqi's expression was peculiar. He hesitated briefly, then reached for the wound powder. This time he was exactly the same as in my last life. He lied and said he'd lost his memory. I didn't expose him. Instead, I went along with it and kept him at home. Before long, we were married. After the wedding, I lavished ever more care on Xiao Jingqi, not only because he was my golden goose, but because he was the crown prince of the Eastern Palace, the future emperor. If I served him poorly now, and let him nurse a grudge, forget the money, I wouldn't even get to keep my life. Every day Xiao Jingqi went to town to slaughter pigs and sell meat. I would carry a little basket and walk a long, long mountain path to bring him food and drink. No matter what time he came home, I would stand at the village entrance holding a lantern, quietly waiting, riding the coattails of Xiao Jingqi's fine looks. The butcher shop was doing a roaring trade. He had such fine, clear features that plenty of girls made a special trip from far away just to buy half a gin of meat, purely for the chance to steal a glance at the handsome butcher Xiao. What they didn't know was that I couldn't have cared less about those small earnings. I was counting the days on my fingers, growing more excited with each one. That day was finally almost here, but several more days passed. I waited and waited, and still there was no sign of Xiao Jingqi departing for the palace. What are you thinking about? I gave a small cough, oddly feeling a twinge of guilt. I'm thinking about you. You're right in front of me. Why think about me? I put on a grievously wronged expression. More and more girls are coming to the shop to buy meat. What if one day you decide you're fed up with me? Say I'm too rough that I can't read? And just cast me aside? What would I do then? Eat your food. Stop talking nonsense, I laughed inwardly. Nonsense? Hardly. Wasn't that precisely what His Highness the Crown Prince had said himself just a few nights ago? You're the one talking nonsense. After all this time being married, the number of times you've called me wife, I could count on my fingers. If I call you wife, will you eat properly? He stood and placed a chopstick of food into my bowl, his fine clear eyes lowering gently, and called out naturally and easily, wife. Inside, he clearly had such contempt for me, yet on the surface, he still had to keep up the performance. Truly exhausting for him. Still, that these days of mutual play acting were coming to an end at last. After dinner, Xiao Jingqi sat at the edge of the bed and suddenly extended his hand toward me. He opened his palm. Resting in it was a plain hairpin. For you. A new jewelry stall opened on the street today. I saw quite a few girls buying these. I thought you'd probably like it. Inside, I was thoroughly unimpressed, but I had to feign delight on the surface. How did you know I'd like this style? I suddenly threw my arms around his neck and leaned in with a bright smile. Darling husband, you treat me so well. Something shifted in Xiao Jingqi's eyes. He caught my wrist, rose and leaned over me, and kissed me. As he drew down the bed curtain, a hazy thought drifted through my mind. Men really are so easy to manage. Early the next morning, a commotion broke out outside the door. Wake up, something big has happened. Wake up. Something big has happened. Wake up, something big has happened. Why are there soldiers everywhere at the village entrance? I bolted upright in bed. Clutching the covers, I found the space beside me already empty. The moment I stepped into the courtyard, I saw Xiao Jingqi standing there in a stone blue robe, hands clasped behind his back, right at the entrance to my little courtyard. The villagers were kneeling in a dense crowd. Your Highness the Crown Prince, your servant arrives late. Finally, why have you only come now? My eyes had gone red with emotion, but I put on the look of someone terrified. Darling, who are these people? Who are these people? You're in the presence of the Crown Prince. Kneel at once. The Crown Prince. I sank softly to my knees, lips trembling, great fat tears rolling down my face. Xiao Jingqi stood where he was, looking at me, back perfectly straight, saying not a word. After a long moment, the words I had been dreaming of finally fell from his lips. The Jiang woman has rendered meritorious service in saving our life. She is to be rewarded 1,000 taels of gold. With that, Xiao Jingqi walked past me. In the brief moment, he paused slightly. I wiped away my tears and snot, and cried out in a voice of utter devastation. This humble woman gives thanks for His Highness's grace. I got to my feet, tucked the heavy tray of gold beside me, then pulled from my sleeve the plain hairpin he had given me yesterday, and ran toward the little stream at the courtyard gate. Just then, Xiao Jingqi behind me called my name in a voice that had lost all composure. Jiang Wanning! He had actually chased after me. I startled, and at the same moment raised my hand high and flung the hairpin into the water. It broke the surface with barely a ripple, a small brief splash, and sank from sight in an instant. Your Highness, from this day forward, you and I have nothing more to do with each other. Xiao Jingqi's footsteps were stopped dead in their tracks by those words. A strange silence fell all around. Sensing Xiao Jingqi's fury, every last person had dropped to the ground, heads carefully bowed, not daring to look up. Yet had they raised their eyes, they would have seen the Crown Prince, looking utterly undone, all dignity lost. Xiao Jingqi's eyes had gone red, fixed rigidly on the spot where the hairpin had vanished, desperately concealing the trembling of his hands beneath his sleeves. I wiped my tears, while quietly thinking to myself, the Crown Prince truly was a cut above the rest. He had even managed to deceive himself with his own performance. What a pity he didn't know that I had once watched Liu Daya meet the fate of being callously cast aside. With even the slightest chance of being used and discarded, I would never let myself take that gamble. Besides, I had heard with my own ears what he truly thought of me. Better to put one's faith in solid heavy gold than in a man's weightless affections. Besides, I'd always found that hairpin ugly. I'd been wanting to throw it away for ages and had held off until today. After quite some time, a cold and dangerous meaning rose in Xiao Jingqi's brow and eyes. Very well. This time Xiao Jingqi did not look back. I watched that vast retinue of people as the village grew smaller and smaller behind them, then flew over to the pile of gold ingots, snatched one up and held it to my lips, and bit down hard. It hurt, but oh, how satisfying. Haha, the villagers nearby stared at me grinning like a fool, looks of horror on their faces, all gazing at me with pity. She's been abandoned so cruelly. Grief-stricken beyond reason, it's driven her half mad. Actually, now that I'd been reborn and got hold of this money, there was one other thing I wanted to do. I didn't know if it would work, but after much thought, I decided to try. I quickly dried my tears, stepped into the midst of the villagers, and called everyone to gather round. Dear neighbors, Wanning has something to say. Once His Highness returns to the palace as the Master of Chu, there may come a day when he recalls his days of hardship here in Lotus Flower Village. Everyone present understood exactly what I was implying. After all, the heart of a ruler is unfathomable. No one dared wager on whether Xiao Jingqi might one day be struck by a sudden whim to erase all memory of his wretched time in Lotus Flower Village. A man as cold-hearted as him, it truly wasn't out of the question. I intended to use this opening to get the villagers to leave. Good heavens, what are we to do? Our family has lived here for generations. If we have to move away, it'll be the death of us. Seeing the moment had come, I spoke slowly. I was the one who brought him here. Naturally, it falls to me to see this through. So, any neighbors who move away within 2 days, I, Wanning, am willing to cover all the costs of leaving Lotus Flower Village and resettling afterward. Wonderful, Wanning! Did you really mean that? Can it truly be this good? I nodded, watching more and more villagers eagerly sign up. I quietly let out a breath of relief. I had grown up without parents, raised on the shared kindness of Lotus Flower Village. Having gained the advantage of a second life, it was only right to do what I could for everyone. With this, the weight in my chest finally lifted. The matter of the villagers was settled. Now there was only one last thing to resolve. I looked over at Liu Daya beside me. She was crouched on the ground, sobbing noisily. I'm not going. I want a handsome man to take home as a husband, too. Ideally even more handsome than the crown prince. My mouth twitched. Like me, she was an orphan, with no relatives to turn to. Thinking of the wretched end she'd met before my rebirth, and seeing how she was now, even with money, there was no guarantee she wouldn't be taken in by some scheming man. I crouched down and wiped her tears. I'll take you somewhere good. Will you come with me? Will there be men to find there? I immediately thought better of saying another word. As the last person to leave, I set fire to the place and burned it to the ground. Before climbing into the carriage, I looked back at the ruins of Lotus Flower Village. As though settling accounts with all the agonizing memories of my death in a former life, it felt like a reckoning, indescribably satisfying. This time, no one would die in that plague. Everyone could take their silver and live well. In the carriage, Liu Daya looked up curiously and asked, "So where exactly is this wonderful place you mentioned?" I pulled up the corner of my mouth, lifted the carriage curtain. The capital. This was also the other idea that had come to me once I had this money in hand. With these funds secured, I was leaving this place for the most prosperous, most profitable city in the world. The capital, where wealth and opportunity thrived. Most importantly, I refused to spend another life trapped in that wretched village until my dying day. The carriage slowly rolled away. What I didn't know was that 3 days later, several men in black came to Lotus Flower Village, save for the one at their head who wore a blue robe, features that were vaguely striking. Bearing impossibly aloof, he looked upon the village, long since emptied, nothing left but rubble and ruins. He shifted slightly but said nothing. The other men in black searched along the stream, as though looking for something. They came back empty-handed. Only the blue-robed young master, when he finally turned to mount his horse, suddenly collapsed heavily to the ground. Looking more closely, he had coughed up a mouthful of blood. It happened to coincide with a new emperor's accession. In the capital, an embroidery house called Yunsang appeared out of nowhere. When it first opened, notices were posted everywhere, taking in destitute women with nowhere to go. Food and lodging provided while they worked and learned their craft, and once their skills were mastered, they could earn their own way. When the notices went up, the people of the capital gossiped endlessly. Most assumed it was some kind of trap. Yet barely half a year later, Yunsang had made a name for itself throughout the entire capital, with its gold leaf embroidery, designs varied and styles fresh and new, with noble ladies across the city clamoring to buy. Word had it that the proprietor of this embroidery house was a woman surnamed Wang. Quite mysterious. This was Yin Xianing, daughter of the left chancellor, browsing the embroidery pieces in the shop, chatting idly with me. "Miss Jiang, it's clearly your embroidery house. Why do you always let Miss Wang be the public face?" I smiled and didn't answer. When I first arrived in the capital, I opened Yunsang, purchased a large residence, and Daya set up a medical clinic right next door to Yunsang, and we also hired a teacher. It was precisely because we had both thrown ourselves into it that our modest businesses had managed to reach where they were today. But this was ultimately Xiao Jingqi's domain. To be safe, I had Daya take the title of public proprietor of Yunsang. By the way, a few days ago, when I accompanied my father into the palace for a banquet, I presented His Majesty with that pair of bird and flower hanging panels you embroidered. My hand on the abacus stopped dead. He stared at the Ning character you had embroidered and knocked over all 9 cups. He then suddenly began coughing violently and asked me several strange questions. He asked who had embroidered those hanging panels. Back when I used to be with Xiao Jingqi, whenever his robe tore, I would mend it, always with a little trick. I'd embroider the character Ning near the left breast, telling him it was a charm for protection. I had always assumed Xiao Jingqi had never noticed such small details. But then again, this young lady's name also contained the character Ning. A small foolish hope stirred in my heart. I pretended to ask casually, "And what did you say?" Yin Xianing's expression suddenly turned serious. I said the hanging panels were... I said I embroidered them, and then I was given the highest reward. All thanks to those nimble hands of yours. Even my father praised my improvement. "Miss Jiang, you've done me an enormous favor. Would you be willing to come to my home for a meal in a few days?" She was all smiles again, back to her usual self. I finally let myself relax, and had just smiled my acceptance, when she added in a conspiratorial whisper, "Everyone says His Majesty is ruthless and sharp, exceptionally good-looking, and the harem has been empty since his accession, so every family of ministers has been scrambling to send daughters to the palace. But I'm not willing, because he has a strange illness." I frowned and looked her up and down. His whole body is solid muscle, obviously in fine health. What strange illness? My father told me in secret. His Majesty has a condition affecting his heart, probably a lingering ailment from his years wandering and hardship. Shh, don't breathe a word of this to anyone. After she left, I sat there in a daze for some time. Something about Xiao Jingqi's reaction had seemed off. I could only reassure myself. All that was long in the past now. Xiao Jingqi surely wouldn't go that far. He was emperor now. Whatever woman he desired was but a single word away. He had probably forgotten all about this country girl of his entirely by now. What I hadn't anticipated was that Xiao Jingqi was precisely the kind of man who never forgot a grudge. That very evening, an embroidery girl came running in from the front courtyard in a panic. "Sister Wanning, you'd best go and see. An important guest has arrived." From the dress and bearing, they looked to be from the palace. My heart began to pound. I turned it over and over in my mind. Something told me whoever had come meant no good. Keep them occupied. Go quickly to the clinic and fetch Daya. In the reception hall, Xiao Jingqi stood perfectly straight. Eyes dark and deep, lips sealed thin. Impossible to read what he was thinking. He wore plain clothes, yet his bearing was undeniably exceptional. That air of authority, impossible to mistake for an ordinary palace servant. Liu Daya had of course recognized Xiao Jingqi's identity. She sat in the host's seat, forcing herself to stay calm. "Young Master Qiao with such an impressive bearing. You must be someone of great distinction. May I ask what brings you to our humble shop today? If it is to place an order, then..." She hadn't finished speaking. Xiao Jingqi gave the faintest lift of his chin, and the 2 attendants at his back carried in the very pair of bird and flower hanging panels Yin Shening had gifted him. and set them down directly. Lu Daya had no idea what this meant. She was stunned. "Young master, what does this mean?" "Stop pretending. We know you're from Lotus Flower Village. We are here to find someone." His expression was flat. He drew a fine, slender dagger from his waist and turned it slowly in his hands, eyes holding a cold and dangerous light. Lu Daya swallowed with difficulty and asked in a trembling voice, "Your Majesty, whom are you looking for?" "My wife, Zhang Wanning." Xiao Jingqi's expression barely held, the red in his eyes almost visible, his entire being radiating a kind of reckless, unhinged energy. I was behind the screen and found that at some point my clothes had been soaked through with sweat. No, Xiao Jingqi finding his way here today had to be connected to those hanging panels. He didn't look right. If this went on, Daya and I might not make it out of here alive. I didn't know why he was looking for me, but I had to face him. I drew a deep breath, rose and walked composedly out from behind the screen, then calmly and smoothly dropped to my knees, eyes docile, palms pressed to the floor. I kowtowed to Xiao Jingqi with a firm, resounding knock. "Your subject, Zhang Wanning, greets your Majesty." The others had quietly withdrawn. I knelt on the ground, not daring to say a word more. "Zhang Wanning, don't think I can't see through that little scheme of yours. You think that if you kneel like this..." Those days we spent together in Lotus Flower Village, every single one of them can simply be written off. His voice was low and rough. "I searched for you a long time. I never imagined you were right here in the capital. I came today to speak plainly with you." I felt as though I'd heard the most absurd joke imaginable and began to wonder whether Xiao Jingqi had gone mad. Did he take me for a fool? If I told him the truth, and he flew into a rage and had my head, what then? This subject would not dare. Xiao Jingqi's brow furrowed. "You think I'll kill you?" At that moment, my absolute absence of trust in him was laid completely bare. He strode to the table, wrote something quickly, and handed me the paper. "This imperial edict written in my own hand guarantees your safety and Yun Sang's for life. Now will you trust me?" Only then did I carefully tuck it away and gathered the nerve to answer him. "I believed I had treated you well. I thought it might earn me a little of your sincerity. Yet you looked down on me, despised me. If you were me, would you trust someone so fickle and heartless? When did I ever say I despised you?" Zhang Wanning, rather rough around the edges, not even literate. This between us was nothing but a passing game. Giving her 1,000 taels of gold is already a great kindness. I stared directly into Xiao Jingqi's eyes and repeated his own words back to him. "As it happens, even if you'd said nothing, I never had any ambitions of my own. Even if I became empress, so what? How long does an emperor's love ever last? I couldn't care less. Oh, and I forgot to tell you. That day when I threw the hairpin away, it wasn't out of heartbreak. Only because it was silver. And I prefer gold." Xiao Jingqi's brow furrowed slightly. He leaned against the table and pressed a hand over his chest. "So, in your eyes, I don't even measure up to 1,000 taels of gold. Zhang Wanning, did you ever feel anything for me at all? That winter when I fell off the cliff going to find you, you searched for me desperately, digging until all 10 fingers were bleeding. Yes, I felt something then. Only that kind of feeling I dared not trust. After I learned to read, I came to understand more and more that the phrase wind, flowers, snow, and moon doesn't belong only to the realm of tender feelings. It can also exist in a life of purpose and ambition. Xiao Jingqi, you've read far more than I have. Surely you understand the meaning of letting go." The words "let go" struck Xiao Jingqi with tremendous force. His eyelashes trembled. He suddenly covered his mouth with his fist and turned away, seized by a violent fit of coughing. His other hand gripped the edge of the table, fighting desperately to keep himself upright. He was about to say something, when blood suddenly poured from his lips, horrifyingly soaking the cloth he pressed to his mouth. Xiao Jingqi fell backwards and collapsed to the floor, eyes closed, unconscious. That day, seeing it for myself, I finally understood what Xiao Jingqi's strange illness actually was. The scene was admittedly rather alarming, but since everything was now out in the open, knowing him as I did, he probably wouldn't trouble me again. I put Xiao Jingqi firmly out of my mind and poured everything into the birthday banquet for Zhuoxiang. The reason was simple. At this point, Yun Sung had gained some reputation among noble ladies of the imperial clan, but that was far from enough. If I could make the most of this occasion, Yun Sung could enter the sightlines of the entire imperial family. On the day of the banquet, I attended as a friend of Yin Xianing's and arrived early, but the moment I stepped through the door, I saw Xiao Jingqi seated right at the center. He noticed me almost immediately. My heart sank. What terrible timing. The instant our eyes met, I calmly shifted my gaze away and walked directly to my seat and sat down. After several rounds of toasting, the atmosphere was lively indeed. When the moment came to present birthday gifts, I brought out the gift I had carefully prepared. In an instant, every eye in the room turned toward me. I have long heard that Lord Yin is an upright official who dislikes extravagance, so this humble girl has brought a few modest novelties from Yun Shangfang. I slowly unfolded what I held, revealing a four-sided embroidery, Yun Shangfang's own creation. Those present were puzzled. "We've only ever heard of double-sided embroidery. What is this four-sided kind?" I smiled, stepped to the center of the room, and first displayed the front of the sachet, then turned it over. That makes two sides. Then I lifted the sachet up against the sunlight, and the longevity and blessing pattern that had been there vanished in an instant, replaced by the design of the 8 treasures longevity roundel, the inner layer's stitchwork finer still, and more exquisitely wrought. I gave a bow, and said clearly, "May your lordship enjoy health in body and peace in spirit, and be blessed with fortune and long life." Remarkable. How wonderful, how wonderful. His lordship beamed from ear to ear, and I allowed myself a quiet moment of satisfaction. Today's business was done. Then, unexpectedly, the man seated at the head of the table suddenly spoke, his burning gaze lingering on my face. "We too find this sachet ingeniously conceived, surpassing even the finest craftsmen in the palace. It should be rewarded." The words had barely fallen when someone in the hall began to applaud, and a chorus of admiration rose all around. When the banquet ended, and I was about to leave, a richly dressed man stepped in front of me. "Miss, you must know who I am." I genuinely did not, but out of courtesy, I simply smiled and shook my head. You are so nimble-fingered, and so lovely besides. It would be a waste to spend your life on needlework. Why not come with me? I'll take care of your business going forward. With that, he moved to put his arm around my waist. I couldn't dodge in time, and he had me. Then I heard a sudden cry of pain. Someone had kicked the man hard from behind, sending him sprawling. He roared, "Who the hell dares kick me?" The next moment, his expression shifted from furious to terrified. Your Majesty, Xiao Jingqi's boot came down on the very hand that had just touched me. He reached over and drew the sword from a guard's belt, flicked his wrist, and the man's hair crown was sent flying. His hair tumbling loose and disheveled, more than half of it shorn away. We did not know that a mere lackey could be so brazen. His face was expressionless, as his foot pressed down harder, as though he meant to grind the hand to nothing. I turned to leave. Xiao Jingqi suddenly seized my wrist and pulled me in the opposite direction. He said nothing, until he had led me behind a garden rockery. Then he demanded, "Every time you see me, that is the face you wear. Yet even for a wretch like that just now, you had a smile?" I had no patience to argue, but my silence only seemed to drive Xiao Jingqi to the edge of endurance and to the edge of jealousy. What did you two say to each other? Did he proposition you, or does he want to marry you? The words came out in a rush, his face betraying a trace of obsession. Do you know, that man keeps 8 mistresses? A faithless philanderer. Why is he allowed, when I am not? What right did that filthy hand have to touch you? I have more wealth than he does. I have had only you. I am far cleaner than he is. Xiao Jingqi suddenly picked up the sword and pressed it into my hands. His eyes were red. He wrapped his own hands around the blade, pointing it at his own heart. I beg you, please don't despise me. If you truly hate me that much, then take this sword and end it. I cut him off, staring at him in disbelief. Xiao Jingqi, have you forgotten who you are? Have you lost your mind? You're right. Perhaps from the day I remembered my past life. I was already lost. Those 2 words, past life, almost stopped my breath. Wanan, tell me honestly, has the reason you've always been so certain I was heartless and faithless something to do with Liu Daya? My heart lurched. How could he know about that? Could it be that Xiao Jingqi had also been reborn? Xiao Jingqi had once fallen from his horse. When he came round, he found a strange set of memories had appeared in his mind. Suddenly I understood. The day I was injured, why I had run into him the moment I entered the village, the herbs he had prepared in advance, and all the small details of his behavior toward me. I had thought he was so good to me, because he had feelings for me. It turned out I had misunderstood from the very beginning. My heart began to stir uneasily. Xiao Jingqi not only knew what had happened in our past life, he had seen through my real reason for saving him, and yet he wasn't angry. In that past life, I had already told her honestly who I was, and had arranged things clearly with Liu Daya. Once I had recovered, I would give her a sum of money in gratitude. The goodwill was not real. Taking shelter in Lotus Village to heal was. I had no feelings for her whatsoever. I never touched her. In that past life, I had no way of knowing about the entanglement between her and Liu Daya, and that was indeed one of the reasons I believed Xiao Jingqi had betrayed me. Every time he did something for me, I couldn't help feeling that none of it was sincere, that it was all performance. This truth left me speechless. I had no idea how to respond. The man who harassed you was not sent by me. Imperial Father sent him to test me several times. I had to pretend to have no interest in you. Those harsh words were to put Imperial Father's mind at ease. I was afraid that once I left, he might move against you. At the time I thought, if I could ascend the throne sooner, I could bring you into the palace sooner. But then you told me you didn't care about any of that. My feelings? The hairpin left by my mother. Power and status. Everything I could give you, you wanted none of it. And what about money? I have nothing left now. Only this. I felt as though I had seen many versions of Xiao Jingqi. The Xiao Jingqi who was nearly dying. The Xiao Jingqi who lived alongside me day after day. And the one who had turned and walked away. All different, yet all within the bounds of what I had anticipated, allowing me to keep my guard composedly in place. But the Xiao Jingqi before me now had shattered every image I had ever held of him. And for the first time, I did not know what to do. Jiang Wanan, can you trust me one more time? I lowered my head and gave no answer. I seemed to need a little time to think it through properly. 7 days later came the Palace Lantern Festival. Ever since the plan at Lord Zuo's birthday banquet, Yun Shangfang's business had been growing steadily. I stood holding a freshly embroidered gold foil Rui lantern, waiting at the place I had arranged to meet Xiao Jingqi. The bridge was alive with people, each wearing a different patterned mask, each carrying a different lantern. Beneath the bridge floated thousands of lotus lanterns, mirrored in the lake's surface, rising and falling with the ripples, like the Milky Way tipped over, pouring out stars across the sky. Only one figure wore a dark mask, walking against the crowd, treading through the moonlight. In his hand, a plump ingot lantern embroidered in Yun Shangfang's fabric. The ingot lantern was round and full, its belly perfectly spherical, endearingly chubby and charming. I really couldn't understand it. All the other hand-embroidered lanterns had sold out in a rush, yet the ingot lantern, my favorite, had only sold 2 or 3. It had become the most unwanted of the whole batch. I'd been fretting over it, until a few days ago, when a large buyer appeared out of nowhere, and bought up every last ingot lantern in one go. I knew perfectly well who that person was. The tall figure in the dark mask walked with a light step, visibly in good spirits. He walked to where I stood, slowed for just a moment, then made a show of continuing past. I deliberately pretended not to recognize him, quietly looked away and gazed off to one side. Sure enough, Xiao Jingqi doubled back, going back and forth several times. Seeing I still gave no reaction, he finally lost patience, and hastily tore off his own mask. Can you really not tell it's me? I nearly laughed, but kept a perfectly straight face and nodded. Never mind, I'll give you another chance next year. If you still don't recognize me then, the year after. The year after that, year by year at this rate, sooner or later you'll recognize me. His expression softened, eyes full of expectation as he looked at me. You asked me to meet you. What did you want to say? I knew well enough what he was hoping for. I reached up and took off my rabbit mask as well, the hand holding the lantern pole weighing up the words again and again. Xiao Jingqi, I made up my mind. There have indeed been many misunderstandings between us, but since you were willing to speak plainly, there are things I no longer wish to keep from you either. I have despised you, and I have also been moved by you, and I am not afraid to trust you one more time. A look of joy rose in his eyes. I let out a breath and continued, but I also have things I want more. If being with you means giving up Yunxiang Fang and my freedom, then I'm afraid I cannot agree. 9-foot palace walls. The rules of an emperor's house, every one of them would become shackles around me. That kind of life may be grander, but I would not be happier than I am now. I would rather be my little money-loving self, fussing over my favorite gold foil thread, saving a bit more silver, then doing what I actually want to do. When there is time, I want to see the mountains and rivers and seas of this world. I know it perfectly well in my heart. That is the life I truly want. Xiao Jingqi, I'm sorry. Having said all of that, I felt considerably lighter inside. I gave a bow, turned to leave, and before I knew it, the man behind me had grabbed hold of me and pulled me back into his arms. His other hand lifted my mask away, and he looked at me seriously, close. Husband and wife bound by a single thread, to grow old together. We have bowed to heaven and earth in the temple at Lotus Village. Xiao Jingqi's fingers traced lightly across my lips, and the next moment a warm kiss fell. If you are unwilling to enter the palace, then forget the palace. I will find a way. But Jiang Wennin, do not think that this will frighten me off. The new year was approaching. Yunxiang Fang had opened its third shop in the capital, and I was too busy to manage it all alone, so I handed those 2 branches to 2 other skilled embroiderers to look after. One day, a heavy snow fell on the capital. Since we had cleared the air between us, Xiao Jingqi seemed to have shed all remaining restraint. Any free moment he had, he came to find me. He said that since I would not enter the palace, he would come out of the palace to find me, and that was the solution he had come up with. What I could not bear most was this. Every time he came, he would bring a pile of rare and precious curiosities to amuse me. What kind of former husband was this? He was clearly a god of wealth, delivering himself to my door. The moment I saw him, I would glance quickly left and right, and while nobody was watching, I would haul him inside. You came through the back door, I take it. Whatever you do, don't use the front. If someone recognizes you as the emperor, they'll frighten every customer away. If you end up ruining my business, never mind the back door, I won't even let you in through the dog flap. He lounged on the daybed laughing, eyes creased shut, not seeming to mind in the slightest that I was practically willing him to crawl through a dog flap. Then Xiao Jingqi suddenly produced a delicate golden key and held it out to me. The key was carved with flowing relief patterns, and set at the top was a small glowing pearl. It was clearly a New Year's gift prepared with care. Wanin! I found it a little odd. New Year was still quite a way off. Why was he already giving New Year gifts? I glanced down, and he had already pressed the key into my hand. I want to ask you for a gift too. I thought he had held out this long, and could no longer hold back. That he was about to say something about me entering the palace again. But to my surprise, all Xiao Jingqi wanted was for me, as before, to embroider the character for Cloud on his robe. You always used to joke that a character embroidered by you was a talisman for me, so every time I wore it out, it was only by taking off your charm that I could return in one piece. My new robes for next year, you still haven't embroidered them for me. That was then. But now Xiao Jingqi was the emperor. Wherever he went, guards protected him. I thought it was rather childish, but considering that golden key, I went and fetched the needle and thread anyway. What if I bring a few more over tomorrow? You could embroider one on the imperial robes while you're at it. I reached out to pinch him, calling him a foolish emperor under my breath. The gesture came so naturally, as if we had been swept back to those quiet days in Lotus Village. I caught myself, schooled my expression, and tried to pull my hand away, only to have Xiao Jingqi close his hand around it. His long fingers slipped between mine, gripping tighter, leaving me no room to retreat. Outside, bright sunlight came streaming in, filling the whole room with warmth. I suddenly feel that if I don't do something, I'd really be letting down that title of foolish emperor. He put his arm around my waist and pressed me down onto the daybed. In the end, I kicked Xiao Jingqi clean off the daybed. After he left, I noticed that the embroidered garment had been left behind in the room. How could he be so careless? Knowing his temperament, he would almost certainly come back shamelessly the very next day to collect it. And yet, unexpectedly, over the following days, Xiao Jingqi went quiet. Not even a shadow of him. When something out of the ordinary happens, it rarely bodes well. An inexplicable sense of foreboding rose in me. I waited several more days, and there was still no movement from Xiao Jingqi's direction. I sent someone to make discreet inquiries at the palace, but not a whisper came back. Then, right at that moment, word began to spread through the capital. A strange illness had broken out in Main Commandery, with a frightening number of deaths. It was then I remembered. Most of the people who had moved away from Lotus Village had gone to Main Commandery. In that past life, the plague had struck fast and hard. With no medicine and no food, the people of Lotus Village had simply endured, dying one by one. Only someone who had truly died once could know what that kind of despair felt like. Main Commandery was considerably more prosperous than Lotus Village, but this was still plague. How long it could hold out, no one could say. The fear was that the larger the place, the more ordinary people would suffer. Precisely because I had lived through it, that hellish torment, I could not simply stand by and do nothing. Without a moment's hesitation, I emptied out most of my savings, arranged carts and horses through the night, loaded several large carts with disaster relief supplies, and headed straight for Main Commandery. Gold and silver matter, of course, but money lost can always be earned back. Set against human life, it counts for nothing. When I arrived, I found that Main Commandery's situation had already been brought under control. Several simple thatched shelters had been erected, specifically to separate the sick. There were fixed points distributing food and medicine. In addition to physicians working in shifts, burning medicinal wood was being used to disinfect. Every detail had been arranged with care. The medicinal herbs and grain I had brought did indeed prove useful. I finally let out a breath of relief. I was just thinking what a capable man the prefect of Mainan must be when I heard a child speak up. It wasn't the prefect at all. Last time Elder Sister whispered to me, it was Lord Xiao who came from the capital. I don't know why, but my mind suddenly flashed to Xiao Jingqi, the gift he had been so eager to send off, and the yun embroidery he had asked me for. My throat tightened. I lowered my voice and asked where Lord Xiao was now. He seems quite seriously ill. Elder sister said he might not make it. I ran all the way to the courtyard where Xiao Jingqi was lodged. The guard posted at the door saw it was me, and didn't dare block my way. I shoved the door open. Xiao Jingqi was indeed lying in bed. His eyes were closed, the skin beneath them faintly dark, as though he had gone a long time without rest. His whole face was hollowed with exhaustion. I realized I was completely unused to seeing him like this, half alive. Xiao Jingqi, I've come to find you. I stood by the bed, glancing at the medicine bowl set beside him. Serves you right for not taking the charm with you. There was a weight in my chest that refused to lift. I knew these weren't the right things to say, but only by saying them could that taut, suspended feeling inside me loosen a little. I blinked against the sting in my eyes and kept going. But don't worry, I worked it out on the road. If you really do die, I'll forget you completely and go on living very well. I'll take all that gold you gave me, marry the wealthiest man in the whole realm, and come burn paper offerings at your grave with him every year. Xiao Jingqi's eyelids suddenly flickered. I startled and swallowed my tears back down. Surely this wasn't the legendary last flare of life before death. He snapped his eyes open, those dark, fathomless eyes, and seized my wrist in one motion, saying through gritted teeth, Jiang Wanning, you dare! Why are you crying? He paused, eyes flooding with delight. You cried for me, he said, more certain now. That means you care about me. Just look at him, gaunt with exhaustion, his face thinner than before, yet somehow gleaming with joy like a man possessed, gripping my hand and refusing to let go. In our past life, the plague came fast and fierce, and Lotus Village was so remote. By the time word reached me and I got there, it was already too late. You were close to those people, and the villagers of Lotus Village had shown me kindness too. Now it has come round to Minan again. No matter how you look at it, I had to come in person. He had thought of Lotus Village so carefully, and yet had never once thought of cutting it out at the root. Those words made something in me soften. He reached out his hand, opened his palm, and I looked on in surprise. There lay the lacquer hairpin, quietly resting in his hand. I only found out this visit. Back then, it was picked up by someone who couldn't find you. Knowing it was yours, they passed it to me. It's not much to look at, and it isn't made of gold. But it is the only keepsake my mother, the consort, left me. If you don't like it, all these years, and this hairpin had found its way back again. Before he could finish, I took it from his hand. I have been wearing rather a lot of gold jewelry lately. A change now and then seems quite nice, actually. The trouble in Minan was finally put to rest. After returning with Xiao Jingqi, I spent my first New Year in the capital, and I received a gift that was truly meant for me. On New Year's Eve, Xiao Jingqi brought me into the palace. I took the key and pushed open the doors of an entire hall blazing with golden light. I stared until my eyes went wide and smiled until I couldn't close my mouth. This was prepared for you long ago. It isn't meant to hold you here. I want you to know that wherever I am, there is a place for you. I wondered how long he had spent composing that speech to charm me. I laughed inwardly, yet found it rather effective all the same. That day, it was the first time I heard you say you cared for me. My heart was full to bursting. For me, that was enough. I wanted nothing more. Wanting, I want to ask you, will you spend your life with me? The hall was filled with light, the candle flame swaying, and the man before me wore an expression of utter sincerity, his eyes, if anything, brighter than the candles themselves. Meeting his gaze, something shifted quietly inside me. You know, I never do a deal at a loss, so this time I accept. Later, Yunsheng Workshop became one of the foremost embroidery houses in the capital. Word had it that Lady Wang not only funded the building of several schools, but became the first woman ever admitted to the capital's Merchants Guild. And I, just as I had always hoped, went wherever I pleased whenever I had the time, until I had seen the landscapes of every corner of the land. In the letters I sent back, sometimes I tucked in a willow sprig from the Jiangnan waterways. Sometimes I sketched the waning moon over the desert. Xiao Jingqi, the peach blossom is out again here. I've learned to brew wine. Everyone says it's quite good. Everyone? Who is everyone? The women of the northern desert are truly full of spirit. When I get back, I must design a pattern for an equestrian riding ensemble. If you let me ride with you, I might consider making you a set. At that, the frown he had been pulling smoothed away. I'll bow at the embroidery house is nearly due. Remember to send over the things I prepared for her. He was touched that she kept track of such small details. Well, he dutifully noted it down and saw it done. Meeting Daya at the dock tomorrow. Don't worry about whether there's enough for the fare. He thought he was overthinking it. If anything truly happened, Anwei would come and tell him. Little Jingqi raised his head and looked out at the empty hall, drifting into memory. He suddenly recalled the young woman named Jiang who had lived next door to him in his past life. Every time she set up her stall, it was always right beside his meat counter. Whenever a customer tried to bargain, even a single coin less and she would glare, hands on hips, scolding them within an inch of their lives, tight-fisted to the bone. Yet every year as winter approached, she would sew little coats for the stray cats and dogs on the street. Well before the cold set in, if she came across a wretched beggar child, she would fish out a few copper coins and share half her bowl of noodles. Whenever Xiao Jingqi had a moment to spare, he couldn't help but watch her. He found her endlessly curious. After ascending to the throne, when news came of a plague in Lotus Village, the first face that flashed through his mind was hers. Was that Miss Jiang still alive somewhere? But that was as far as it went in that life. Afterwards, Xiao Jingqi served as a diligent and conscientious emperor, yet fell ill and died in a particularly bitter winter. When he opened his eyes again, before the memories of his past life had even returned, he met Jiang Wanning first. Their meeting too was in winter. He arrived shrouded in wind and snow. From that moment on, he fell into a bind he would spend the rest of his life unable to escape. Xiao Jingqi thought again of his youth, of what his mother the consort had said on her deathbed. The greatest regret of my life was being born into this era and meeting your father the emperor. Remember what I tell you, do not be like him. He thought he would manage it. Xiao Jingqi came back to himself from the memory, closed the last letter and tucked it carefully into the box. Long or short, those few lines in every letter she sent put his heart at ease, no matter the distance between them. Though the letters, owing to the roads, the weather, and all manner of things, did not always arrive on time, whenever he found himself missing her, Xiao Jingqi liked to sit alone in this vast hall of Jintai Palace, reading the letters over and over, counting the days until she came home. He had simply moved the desk where he reviewed memorials, in here as well. In truth, it was rather amusing. Zhang Wanning herself had barely spent any time in Jintai Palace, yet here he was, always in residence. Your Majesty, I am not sure why, but your Majesty's heart is beating. Rather quickly. What is it? The lady from Yunshang Workshop, she's back. He pressed his lips together. Joy welled up from somewhere deep inside, beyond all suppressing. Prepare the carriage, we are going out. The night air was cool as water. Someone came riding hard, scattering spring blossoms across the ground. As it turned out, Jintai Palace, from beginning to end, had only ever been lit up for him alone.